Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. We just talked about Will Johnson and how he really wants to play both ways for Michigan this upcoming year. Maybe do a little Charles Woodson impersonation this year, but I'm not necessarily holding out too much optimism, but I would love to see it, that's for sure. But let's jump into ACC play and let's get into some win totals. There are definitely some teams that I think might just be a little bit too high, might be a little bit too low, a ton of teams that are right on the money, but the most interesting thing to me is who is at the top of these win totals, because it's not just one team anymore. It used to be, it was Clemson and everyone else, and that was the way the ACC worked for quite some time under Dabo Swinney. And now Florida State and Miami have just slowly been building up track, slowly kind of building up that gap that is formed between them and Clemson, both from a talent perspective and just really playing good football. They added new coaches since that, reign has happened with Mike Norvell and Mario Cristobal coming in. There's a lot of confidence, let's just put it that way, between those two teams. And I think it's now a three-horse race in the ACC, which is something that I'm a big fan of. I think it makes it a little bit more fun for sure, but it definitely has got to make some Clemson fans just a little bit nervous. But Clemson has the ability to shut everyone up, including me, to be totally honest. They have the ability to show everyone that they're doing it the right way, that they are still the class of this conference, and they are still the class of this conference, have every ability to win this conference, and kind of assert their dominance over it once again. Cade Klubnik, in my opinion, might be the most important player in the entire conference. I think if he plays really good football, it might just be Clemson's conference to lose, to be totally honest with you, with what they have on defense. But that's a big if. If we've watched, the first couple of years of him, it's not necessarily been the most inspiring football in the world, but still a very talented player, definitely someone that could hit his ceiling and be really, really good. So Clemson's still at the top, but a lot of teams have joined them there. Florida State is a very interesting team. They have a remarkable amount of hype going into this season, and with hype comes a lot of pressure. We all know that. I think it's going to be really interesting. I feel like a lot of people going into this season just assume they're going to be one of the teams in Charlotte at the end of the year. I'm not quite as confident. Now, they definitely are one of the best teams in the conference, but I do think they have a ton of big-time challenges this year that might just get them at some point. That week 0 game against Tech is absolutely huge. If you drop that game, there's going to be some very interesting conversations. And then Miami being up here is just remarkable. The turnaround that they've had over the last couple of years. Last year did not quite go the way that they wanted, but it feels like they're ready to roll. Cam Ward coming in was probably the highest profile transfer outside of maybe Will Howard going to Ohio State, and I think he's ready to take Miami back to the top of the ACC. If he does it, there's going to be a lot of talk from some Miami fans, and I don't know if we're all fully ready for that time, but it'll be fascinating to watch these teams. It's now a three-horse race for this conference. And then you get into the 8.5 win total teams. You got Louisville, a very, very interesting team from a year ago, went to the ACC title game. They had tons of turnover, a lot of people going in, a lot of people coming out. But the reality is Jeff Brom did this last year, and he took it totally in stride. So I have some confidence in this Louisville team. I think Tyler Shuck is the absolute key to this team. If he can, really play some good football, they're going to be rolling. I feel pretty confident in that because they have a lot of other really good things in place over there. NC State, in my opinion, is the most interesting team in the conference. If Grayson McCall plays his best football, I think they can compete with every other team, and maybe he's the best quarterback in this conference, to be totally honest with you. He can do just really incredible things and run this offense at a remarkably high rate. And they have some dudes on the outside. They have Noah Rogers coming in from Ohio State. Kevin Concepcion is one of the most electric players in the conference. Justin Jolie coming in from UConn is absolutely huge. So I really like this team. I think they could absolutely make some noise. And then Virginia Tech is the team that I'm really falling in love with in this conference. I think Kyron Drones is one of the quarterbacks in this conference that is returning with experience. That is something that does not come very often across this conference this upcoming season. So it is definitely a luxury to have. I think they have the ability to win the conference, especially with the schedule they face, which is very manageable for sure. And then you get to the 7.5 win teams, North Carolina, SMU, and Syracuse. North Carolina is a fascinating team to me because you had Max Johnson come in to replace Drake May. Omarion Hampton is going to be the engine of this offense. There's no two ways about that. He's a really good engine for an offense, to be totally honest with you. And I don't think UNC will be any layup for a team in this conference. I don't necessarily think they're going to light the world on fire. Or I feel like 7.5 might be roughly the right number, although I'm not too big on UNC. But I don't think they're going to make life easy on a ton of teams. I think they're going to run the ball, play some at least okay defense at times, and try to steal some wins here and there. And then you have SMU with Preston Stone, a very interesting team. I think he's one of the more known commodities in the ACC when it comes to quarterbacks. There's not a lot of guys that I can look at and say definitively who they are. I can with Preston Stone. So I think that's a huge luxury for them. They're one of those teams that is going to be able to compete pretty much right away, and then if they pick up a little bit of steam or win some games they're not supposed to, things get really interesting in Dallas pretty quickly. And then you have Syracuse. They're the wild card here. Fran Brown coming in his first year of Syracuse has done just incredible things in the portal. Bringing in Kyle McCord is an absolutely huge pickup. They brought in a couple wide receivers that have been big time. So there's going to be some really, really good players out there for Syracuse, a much bigger talent level than they've had in a really, really long time. So I'm really interested in what the Orange can do this year. I absolutely love Fran Brown as a head coach, so I'm definitely going to be watching them very, very closely this upcoming year. And then at 6.5, you have California, a team coming in from the Pac-12. They're going to be really run heavy, kind of like UNC. Jaden Ott is one of the most electrifying players in the entire country, can carry the offense at times. I think bringing in Tobias Merriweather as a wide receiver from Notre Dame was absolutely huge, and I think they have the ability to pull off some upsets this year. I don't necessarily love the team overall, but I do think they have enough guys to kind of spring an upset here or there, maybe just be a Cinderella type team possibly. And then you get to the 5.5 teams, Duke, Georgia Tech, and Pitt. Duke is breaking in that new quarterback, Malik Murphy, someone that they really like, has just ridiculous arm strength, and definitely someone that can sling the ball all over the field. I don't think the portal was exactly kind to them outside of Malik Murphy. The coaching change is going to be huge, obviously, and Manny Diaz taking over his second head coaching reign. It's going to be a lot of eyes on him, but I do think they're going to play really good defense and kind of have that offense that just tries to get you a couple of times, tries to get you over top, throw a couple of deep balls from time to time, and just make life a little bit tough on you. But then we'll get into Georgia Tech, a very, very interesting team going into this year. I think Haynes King coming back is as big of a return for really anyone in the country. He did incredible things a year ago, led one of the best offenses in this conference, and they're right back to where they want to be to maybe do it again this upcoming year. So very fascinating team. Cannot wait to see what they do this upcoming year. And then you have Pittsburgh. Don't necessarily love this team. There's not a lot here that I can really sink my teeth into. I think they're going to be a solid team going forward. I think Eli Holstein is a very good quarterback that came over from Bama, but the reality is 2024 is going to be a little bit of a rough time in Pittsburgh. Then you get to the 4.5, Boston College, Virginia, Wake Forest. Boston College with Bill O'Brien as a new head coach is going to be really interesting, but it's going to take time for them to step up. I think Thomas Castellanos is a very fun player, but they're likely towards the bottom of this league for at least a little bit. And then you have Virginia, a best case scenario for them, pull an upset from here to there. You know, pull an upset, show teams that you at least can hang around with some of these teams and maybe pick up a couple of guys in recruiting and kind of slowly start to build. But right now it's just they're not going to be a player in the ACC this year. And then Wake Forest, kind of the same thing. Try to be the ruiner of a season. Try to be the team that throws a wrench into the works of one of the top teams in this conference. And then, at the very least, some people are looking at you as a transfer portal destination or maybe a recruiting destination. And then you have Stanford at the very bottom. As I said before, Stanford's going to be at the bottom of the ACC until further notice. I'd love to tell you that they're going to move up. It's going to be a tough year, and it could just be that's the way it is at Stanford for quite some time. But let's get into who I think is too high, too low. We'll kind of roll through this pretty quickly here. We got NC State at 7.5 and California at 6.5. I think those are a little bit too high. I don't love this UNC team too much. I think the defense is really going to struggle to keep up with some of the offenses around the ACC. Although they have some really good players like Camion Rucker and some other guys around that defense, I just don't love the group overall. And I think the big thing about this team is they're going to try to ride that running back. And if they can't do that because they're behind in games and it's Mac Johnson throwing the ball a ton, it's going to be rough. I'll be totally honest with you. And then Cal kind of the same story. If you can't ride Jaden Ott, you're going to have a problem. That's just kind of the reality, and I don't think their defense is going to be good enough to not create some deficits for themselves and not create some precarious situations for them to be put in. So I don't necessarily love either of those teams and where they're at. The two low teams, I think SMU at 7.5 is too low, Duke at 5.5, Georgia Tech at 5.5. So let's start with SMU. I think SMU is a team that I love this year, if I'm being totally honest. Looking up and down this roster, I've yet to find too many big holes. Now, the talent level isn't necessarily a Miami or a Clemson level or a Florida State level team, but they have tons of guys that can play really good football and understand what is going to be asked of them every single day, and that's an absolute commodity in this league this upcoming year. They do miss Miami and Clemson on their schedule, get Florida State at home, so there's going to be really, really interesting games for SMU, and I think they might just be able to steal that Florida State game at home, but we'll get to that when we get to that. And then you got Duke at 5.5. I think they're going to follow a very simple formula that was kind of a pseudo-Bama formula from a year ago, where we're going to play defense, we're going to try to stop you as much as possible, and then we're going to beat you with some big plays, and we're going to win games, 24-21 or 27-24. It's not going to be very pretty, but we're going to make just enough plays. And I think with Malik Murphy, they absolutely have the ability to do that. And I think Manny Diaz is going to field a really good defense, to be totally honest. And then Georgia Tech, I think they have tons of upside this year. The issue is the schedule is an absolute battle. It's one of the toughest in the entire country, but I'd bet on the Jackets and Brent Key winning at least 7 games, because I think what Brent Key is doing over there in Atlanta is just been really, really fun to watch, and he's doing everything the way that he wants to, and it's working out pretty beautifully as of right now. And then everyone else is pretty much on the money. I think Pitt might be a little bit too high. I think Boston College might be a touch too low. But other than that, I mostly like this group. I think the ACC is really a tough one to keep track on. It's going to be a very interesting conference to watch and kind of unfold over this season, but for the time being, we're going to get into some Cinderellas. Right after this break, we're going to jump into 2 teams that I'm watching especially closely in the ACC to make some noise, maybe from a 5.5 win total, a 7.5 win total, something where not a lot of people are expecting a ton, but maybe they make some more noise than people are expecting. But we'll take the break here, and when we come back, we will unpack all of that, so stick with us.